I will launch right into it then. I've known Ken a long time, since I was born, since he's my brother. Full disclosure here, just so you'll know. Yes, it's nepotism, but uh, we roll with it. Anyway, the intro is Ken started by obtaining his bachelor's degree in zoology in 1963 from UC Davis, and soon after was employed by the US government as a field biologist in large whale and marine bird research. During the Vietnam era, he was commissioned as a US Navy officer and oceanographic specialist. He did his graduate studies at UC Santa Cruz with Dr. Ken Norris, the world famous marine mammal biologist. Ken is a pioneer in photo identification of cetaceans and is the founder of Orca Survey and the Center for Whale Research. I'd just like to add that Ken's diligent persistence in meticulously photographing and logging every southern resident orca every year since 1976 has given us and state and federal governments the data needed to assess the health of this population, leading to their endangered listing under the ESA in 2005 and worldwide public awareness of this precious orca population. Ken's talk is titled Southern Resident Orca Update and Elwha Salmon. Please welcome Ken Balcomb. Over to you, Ken.
Thank you, Howie. Yeah. And thank you, Cindy and Amanda. And let's see, do I push something here to start or stop video? I see myself up there, but not on the big screen.
Yeah, so Ken, at the bottom of your screen in the bar, there should be a green button that says share screen.
Oh, share the screen.
You click on that, then you'll be able to access whatever you have pulled up in the background of your computer.
Well, it's supposed to be in the background. Okay, so what I'll do is, I'll just
should be one of the windows there somewhere.
Yeah. Here we go. What is that? That just, am I still there?
Yeah, looks like you're on a Word document.
Well, I can bring that over here. No, I wanted to start with my slideshow, if this will come up. Let's see if it will. Does that come up? Beginning of scientific studies?
Yep, you're on.
Okay, well, in addition to thanking you all and thanking everybody that's participating in this, and a huge thanks to Flip and to Alex for really, I was emotional listening to them. It was like phenomenal. You guys are just amazing. And thank you to all your supporters that are helping with all this. The slideshow was great. I saw a lot more than I thought I would see on that. But anyway, I want to start with acknowledging Dr. Mike Bigg. I got out of the Navy in 1975 to take a contract with the National Marine Fisheries Service to basically find this management data required for the captive fishery on the United States side. We already had Mike Bigg's work in Canada, and there was a lot of rumor around in the science circles that, you know, you got to be crazy to say that you know every whale from photo identification. But Mike, by 1975, did. But he was not believed generally. And in 1976, I started this little study with National Marine Fisheries. Let's see if we can go to it. Basically, starting on April Fools and ending on Halloween, the government said, Ken, go out and tell us how many whales are in greater Puget Sound environs, which included, they figured that Canada is just part of Puget Sound. So we could go anywhere out the strait, up the Strait of Georgia, down to Puget Sound, look around. By the time the project was over in October, we'd had 50 encounters with killer whales. And most of these, let's see if my cursor will show up, most of them were around the San Juans, a few out in the strait, and by golly, quite regularly in Puget Sound itself. And these were mostly southern resident killer whales, as Mike had already proposed. And we agreed with Mike that in 1976, by the end of the season, there were 71 whales. And every year since then, we've been doing the same photo identification, got almost 100 whales here in 1995. And then we had a steep decline. We went to the God Squad in Hawaii, meeting of the biologists from the government agencies, and cautioned them that, hey, we've got a problem going on. We didn't know what the future was going to be, but the present was looking bad. And finally, in 2005, the southern resident killer whale population was declared endangered. And it's been sort of wobbling around. It was in the 80s, 83. It's currently 74. And the population decrease in general has been driven by LPOD, or the dynamics of the population. But the number itself is actually kind of meaningless. The number of, as Flip pointed out, the progress is measured in the offspring, the calves. But in this case, the calves have to survive, and they have to become teenagers before they're going to enter the reproductive cohort. So we've got a challenge that this number that we're looking at right now doesn't really mean anything until a decade from now or more. What's going on in this population that's startling to me is that, at the beginning of the study, we had Dr. Peter Olesiuk did some sophisticated math statistics on it. And we came up with the average interval of, interval of birthings after the female reaches sexual maturity was about 5.2 years. That's now more than 10 years. And so basically we have the reproductive potential of this. And furthermore, what has happened is most of these babies are males, which in the future are not going to be able to be mothers. It's very unlikely. So we do have a problem in this population. And of course, we've been talking about this for ever since 1999. A serious problem. But one of the things that we found early in the study was that if we look at this graph here, 1976, 77, 78, and the months that we studied, these little hatch marks on the bottom are weekly intervals. We took the fisheries data, which is the solid black line, and this is just sport fishing, how many sport fish were caught. And we can look at the total number here. Some weeks it was, real high point here, 24 to 26,000. And most of these were Chinook salmon, but not all. But the stippled area was the number of days per week that we had the southern residents in the Puget Sound or the study area. And we'd have a lot of time when they were 7 days a week, or as Alex said, almost every day they were somewhere around here. and they were quite often in Puget Sound. We knew at the time there's a very high correlation between the salmon and the whales, but we had just entered into an era where they were not being shot at anymore. The previous decades, the assumption was that those predators are taking our fish, and therefore we got to protect our fish, and we shoot them. We didn't want to return to that era, but we did have the data that showed that, yeah, they're fish eaters. The population also, they utilize the habitat from, say, April to September, almost 7 days a week. They were here all the time. And then we look at our recent graphic of their time spent in recent years. They're here in total less than 25% of the time. L-pod is almost never here. K-pod is seldom here. The occurrence of whales in the area, thank goodness we have J-pod. They are still our most resident of the resident whales in the area. But we have, in addition to a declining population, we have a declining occurrence of them in the habitat, sort of reminiscent of what Alex was seeing up north with her whales disappeared for a while. And thank goodness they came back. And what was really nice about what she had to say was that when they came back, they had a lot of the same foraging, traveling behaviors that she had observed. They hadn't forgotten how to deal with the habitat. Anyway, that's encouraging to me, because as we look to a future of more salmon and more whales, having them return to the conditions that we saw in the 70s would be just most heartening for future generations of people to see. They're our neighbors, and we should treat them as welcome neighbors. Anyway, so we started looking at what's going on in the fish situation, the Chinook salmon particularly, because Dr. John Ford and myself, others published a correlation, Alec Graham Ellis was in on that, that 80% of the southern resident diet in the season that we were looking at was Chinook. And that's to be understood, because Chinook are big, beautiful fish. And there were lots of them. Historically, roughly 7 million annually came to all these different habitats, from California to here we just have basically the Puget Sound area. They also came to the habitats north of here, British Columbia and Alaska, and that was even more than our 7 million fish. Anyway, the biomass was here, and the fish were big, and they were abundant, and they've been basically fished out. This is the years 1972 to 76. The BC data was showing that, high year they would get 490,000 Chinook, average 343,000, and this was just in the sport fishery. And then they later on came and said, oh, well, they're actually about twice as high as reported in the original estimates. So about 1 million fish were taken out of the Canadian Georgia Strait area. In the fish that came through and were caught in U.S. fisheries, came through the Strait of Juan de Fuca, there were 1.5 to 1.9 million of those fish were in the catches every year. So we had, say 2.5 to 3 million salmon that were caught by humans in that time frame, in that habitat that was now the core habitat for the foraging of the southern residents. And it was then too, but they were here all the time. And now because we have fewer fish, they're not here. We put this correlation together years ago and showed this is mortality bars among the southern residents that when you had these dips in fish, this is fish by all river systems, harvest and escapement. When you got below 5 million fish, you'd have an increase in the mortality in the southern resident population. This is just, I'm a visual animal, although I have had quite an exposure to acoustics. But I had to actually see this to affirm my belief that, you know, this is a high correlation. We got to do something about the fish. So these numbers here, I was just trying to find out, well, okay, where did these Puget Sound fish go? And this friend has the Glenwood Springs hatchery over on Orcas Island. We didn't have access to all the government stuff, but he, over the years, he's released 50 million Chinook salmon and had 27% of them are caught in the Alaskan fisheries, 3% in the high seas fishery, 32% in the Canadian fisheries, 20% in the Washington fisheries. And then as we get further south, you have fewer numbers. And that's because most of these fish come out of the Strait of Juan de Fuca and turn right and follow this pattern. Go out to the high seas, that's sockeye, follow. The yellows is the Chinook pattern. But anyway, they get caught in all these areas, but they return to their rivers of hatching. And interestingly enough, about 0.9% return. There is a straying, and they return to the Snake River system, which is part of the Columbia. And that's probably, they got caught up in the crowds of fish going back into the Columbia. So we were looking for a river to restore, or to advocate, or to champion in fish recovery. And as you know, I spent several years beating my head against bureaucracy, the governor of Washington, the senators in our state, and just could not get past the political hurdle of, hey, let's do something about the Snake River system, because that would open up about 1 million Chinook salmon if that system were restored. That would be a huge benefit to the southern residents. We know they're needing those fish, and we know that they historically consumed them. But we were lucky in that the U.S. National Park Service in the Olympic Peninsula had already proposed to remove the Glines Canyon Dam and the Elwha Dam, the only dam structures in the Olympic Peninsula that were preventing the fish from going upriver to their spawning areas. They were proposing to remove these dams. I first became aware of that in reading their EIS back in the 70s. And if they removed both dams within 20 to 25 or 21 years, 25 years, they would have 30,000 adult salmon returning to spawn. They'd also have coho, they'd also have chum, they'd also have pinks. The recovery of the Elwha River system was something that was definitely a need, because it had been blocked by these dams for 100 years, and these fish were basically, if they didn't do anything, you only had about 1,500 Chinook, less than that in coho. You know, you had just basically meaningless numbers of salmon. But if you remove the dams, you could restore the populations of fish, just the natural restoration. So we figure that would provide a week or so of whale food, and they're not going to eat the fish that are in the river. They're going to eat the ones that are still in the ocean, and there'll be a lot more of them that are in the ocean that make it back to the river, and we'll get to that in a bit. But anyway, what occurred to me was that after beating my head against the bureaucrats for so long, that we have to celebrate a positive story here. And we know that this salmon restoration is underway in the Elwha system, and it just needs a champion. And I believe that the southern resident killer whales champion this event as much as anything. They will come back if we will recover the river. The fish will come back and the whales will come back. So we decided to work on that. Here's the legacy project. We're still going to continue the Orca survey work, but I've been going up this Elwha River here for 60 years. I've been wanting to hike over these mountains. I was stationed just on the other side. I was going to hike in this direction. But all of a sudden, we drove around here and looked for for sale signs and stuff, and talked to one of the neighbors over in this direction, and told him that if he ever hears of anything, let us know that's for sale, because there wasn't anything for sale up there. And then boom, he called a couple of weeks later and said, oh, these folks are maybe going to sell. So I went over and chatted with him, and we had shared vision of okay, they own across the river. They own on both sides of the river, 45 acres. And they can control what happened. I mean, private ownership is, that's what we're depending on here. The government national park is up here. You have the national forest here. And then we're right in between where the two dams were. And we have a big chunk of the private land. We're going to just buy this for the whales. If you find yourself out on Highway 101 someday, you're welcome to drop by. When you go through Port Angeles, take Olympic Highway 101 and you're going west toward Nia Bay. And right after you cross the river down there at the bridge, you can cross the river here, and then you'd make the first left turn on Herrick Road, and then the Glacier Road, and then Mountain Valley Lane, go to the end of the road, and there you are. This is now, the whales own that. Actually, the center does, but it's in the name of the whales, and it's in perpetuity as far as I'm concerned. These two areas are going to be the neighbors. We don't own their property, but we own this. This is 700 feet of spawning habitat in the mainstream Elwha River. And across the river, there have been proposals to do rock mining, gravel pits. There's logging going, the Forest Service is in charge of this area. I don't think anybody's going to log right up to the river, but that's what has gone on in this whole area, is logging, basically destruction of habitat. Anyway, none of that's going to happen from now on Big Salmon Ranch. We renamed it from Spirit Horse Ranch to Big Salmon. And this is the river in front of we own both sides. It's all alders and stuff over on the other side, but on this side it's cedars and pines, and it's just gorgeous country, and it's going to remain undeveloped. We also have the location of the former Elwha post office. Now this old cedar tree has since disintegrated. This was here in 1910. In fact, the village of Elwha was where the ranch is now. And also we have the trail system that goes up from the end of Herrick Road to Altair Campground in the national park. It's about a 6-mile hike, takes about 3 hours. It's not an exertion. And the road is closed on the east side, but you can get up as far as Madison Falls and hike back a couple miles from Altair Campground. So the whole thing would take you about 5 hours. Anyway, and the hot springs are up beyond that. But we didn't buy this ranch for the springs. We bought it for the fish. And the Chinook used to go up the Elwha prior to the dams. We had summer fall run that went most of the way, and a spring run that went all the way to the high country, to the glaciers that fed this river. These are the fish that we want to encourage to come back. We also have steelhead, chum, coho, sockeye, bull, pink. They're all in the river too, but the ones that went furthest up were the Chinook, and they were the biggest. I'm real fond of maps, so I find every map that I can and look at the topography, and I've hiked around these areas a fair amount. I haven't gone to the headwaters. I would love to, but I'm probably too old now. But anyway, and the dam removal was begun in 2011 and basically completed a year later. Took out the lower Elwha Dam and then took out the Glines Canyon Dam. And here's the ranch right in the middle of them, in the heart of what was the return of the Chinook. The biggest obstacle to the removal was political. Then Senator Slade Gorton was he was lampooned in this Seattle Post-Intelligencer article, cartoon, that, you know, basically he was not going to allow the dams to be removed no matter what, similar to the Snake River situation now. It's these guys, the politicians, that we have to get going this way. So the educational program that I see is not so much the public. We're pretty darn aware of what's going on, but we have to get the bureaucrats and the politicians to go that direction. I think Alex hit the nail on the head there, that you know, when you get to that point, you have to learn how to deal with them. And I, quite frankly, couldn't do that. So these folks did. The Olympic National Park partnered with the Lower Elwha Clallam Tribe, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, the U.S. Geological Survey, Coastal Watershed Institute, and others, I'm sure. I'm just taking this off of their website. And basically took out the dams. So just do a little schematic here of what's happened since 2012 when they took out the dams. The WDFW hatchery was right here on the lower Elwha. The Elwha, lower Elwha Clallam tribe is in this pink area here, and they have a hatchery here as well. But it's the WDFW hatchery that's raising Chinook. In 2012, after the dams were removed, the Chinook came right back to, here's where the Big Salmon Ranch is, north of the Olympic National Park, and went to Little River and to Indian Creek and along the main stem of the Elwha River. Some went past the ranch, they just bypassed it then, and went a little bit higher up, but still not quite to the Glines Canyon Dam. And these weren't surveyed areas above that. And the total number of reds, the fish nests which involved a male and a female, was 209 reds in 2012. In 2013, it was 748 reds. And now they're coming to the ranch. They still haven't gotten to the high country, but they're getting more into the area just below Glines Canyon Dam. In 2014, had 1,349 reds. And now we have significant numbers in the area of the ranch and even more going up, still not quite to the Glines Canyon Dam. And the high country again wasn't surveyed. 2015, 937 reds, still in the middle mainstream area. This McDonald stream gauge is just south of our land. We have this right here. In fact, out to here. So this McDonald stream gauge, just watch it on everything. That'll give you an idea how many nests. These nests are on the river in front of the ranch. 2016, now we had 615. And there were some naysayers saying, well, you know, it was going up and now it's going down. 2017, you had 767 reds. Again, they're up in the Indian Creek and some in the Little River, and a few on the ranch, but now they're starting to come up past the Glines Canyon Dam. These red dots up above the dam, these are nests. So they are re-entering their former habitat. In 2018, there were 1,601 nests, and now they're definitely reestablishing themselves in the river habitat. And in 2019, 1,672. I don't have the 2020 data. I hope it's increased again, but there will be some variability in the return of these fish, but they're coming back. And here's the general trend. The total reds gone from 209, and before that it was 0 to 1,672, and in the middle area 760. This is the area that the ranch is in. And of course, with the removal of the dams, there was a lot of the sediment being washed out in the storms, and this would affect, for example, the high turbidity in the 2013 range would affect the survival of the fish that would be returning 3 to 4 years later. So it's to be expected that there would be some loss in future years as a result of just getting rid of the turbidity. This is the stream gauge, the McDonald stream gauge data up here showing the flow of the water. And obviously, when you get higher flows, it stirs up more of the mud from the dams. But this is all going to wash out. This is the 21 to 30 year program. So the life cycle, what do we start with? The salmon or the egg? Well, I'm going to start with the salmon laying their eggs in the gravel. They incubate. You have some death after spawning, and then death of the eggs that just don't hatch, they don't make it. Then you have alevins emerge, and you have death from habitat destruction, pollution, predators. Then you have the fry in the river. Then you have the smolts, which adapt to the salt water. And then you have, they go out in the ocean and become adult. And also you have fishing and predators out there. Anyway, your return is affected by all of this mortality on the way. Here's one of the mortality factors. Some of the natural wildlife there eats eggs. In a wild Lewis River Chinook population, There's a McIsaacs did a PhD thesis, had about 5,000 eggs per female, had about a 65% egg to fry survival, had a fry to smolt survival of about 10%, had a smolt to adult survival of about 2.38. This is called the SAR. And the fishery at the time was about half the fish were taken in the fisheries. And so you had returning spawners for female, you'd have close to 4 returning for each female within that return in the Wild Lewis River. And that would be after harvest. So oh my goodness, I have all this stuff. I gotta diminish this. Okay, so I've just run the same numbers there with the total reds, 5,000 eggs each, going through the fry and smolt stage. How many returning adults might we expect? Almost 13,000 in 2019. Obviously, with only 1,700 making it up the river, the rest were taken by predators or by fishermen. Fishermen are predators too. Anyway, the salmon life cycle is designed to have good years and bad years. It has enormous potential for recovery. They just have to let it recover by not taking all of the potential fish returning. And harvest at the sea is managed by, let's see here, yeah, the Pacific Fishery Management Council. And you can go to their website, and I recommend that you do. You could see the Salmon Advisory Subpanel, what they do. They're comprised of tribal representatives from the coast, 1 gill netter, 2 charter boat operators, 3 trollers, 5 sport fishers, 1 processor, and 1 conservation representative. And this conservation representative is Miss Megan Mueller, who's in Seattle. And I would suggest that if anybody knows her, we contact her and find out, well, just what is our conservation goal here, and how do we manage this fishery? Because we know that historically, these dark green bars, this is the Puget Sound population of Chinook only, the Nooksack, Skagit, Cascade, Sauk, Stillaguamish, Snoqualmie, and so on. Upwards of 50,000 fish coming to some rivers. And this is the historical. The light green is the present. So we've got maybe 23,000 fish returning currently that previously was allowing harvests of 1 million and returns of 50,000 and more in each river system and some river systems. Anyway, the harvest was historically large. And put this chart on here. This is another PhD, D.E. Rogers, 1951. This is the data from 1951 to 2001. And the harvest rate, the red bars are the harvest, the blue bars are the escapement, estimated escapement. And here would be the percent harvested, upwards of 90%. Real high, always above 50%, that were being harvested. And as this harvest continued over the years, the big fish were fished out. This is classic in fisheries. The average weight of fish now is half of what it was back in 1970. Here's a blow up of that Rogers graph. And here's an extension of it to 2013. We got to this is when we started really looking at it seriously, and we have to continue it. But basically, you can have facts, you can have data, you have all this stuff. We know what's gone on. We've had habitat destruction, we've had overfishing, we've got pollution going on. We got to start somewhere. And NOAA has got these programs that really fancy. If you look at their recovery action database, you can see for whales, they have a nice little whale thing, and they have 66 actions and 30 actions. And they've also got a recovery plan for southern resident killer whales. I think we ought to do a word count, because I made a quip one time. These whales don't eat words, they eat salmon. You know, I mean, we can put tens of thousands, millions of words out there, and it doesn't do anything if you don't actually recover. And we're not actually recovering, with the exception of the Elwha. Same thing in Canada. There are a lot of words. There's some beautiful graphics on their site. And, you know, I mean, just seeing what all these activities and which ones are on track and which are delayed, and nice pie charts of them. And you look at the species, you know, beautiful fish here. Chinook, decrease, 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 all of them. Yukon to southern BC. And you see what's happening in all these river systems. If you take this pink area, which is, it requires 2% survival to adult ratio to return the population. I mean, that's a stable. And if you get up to 6%, you can get an increasing return population. Very few of these populations make it to the pink in their, this is all hatchery data for sub-yearling releases. For yearling releases, they do a little better if you hold them for a year, but it costs more. But still, you have most of these river systems are not going to make it in terms of recruitment for the future. And it shows in the graphics here, the red areas are, these are flagged for serious problem in the BC system. We only have 2 areas here, 2 green dots that are any good, and then the rest of them are either data deficient, unknown, or they're going down. And the response by the Canadian government is to add $11.4 million on the enforcement side to enforce whale watching regulations. I would like to see part of that, or a big part of that, all of that $1 billion ocean fund that Canada touts to be spent on salmon restoration throughout BC, instead of these closure areas and keep 400 meters away from killer whales. You know, they have really pretty charts. And fishery closure, where they came up with this killer whale foraging area stuff, it's make-believe. They obviously forage in a lot more area than DFO is recognizing. But it does provide some great photo ops here on our side of the border. For example, Governor Inslee signing crucial orca recovery bills, which includes a lot of enforcement and regulation on whale watching. Like that's somehow gonna recover the whales without food. But they're great photo ops. Anyway, what came to my attention was that this place was for sale, and talking with the owners, they wanted 1.3 million, but they were willing to take a modest down payment, 0 interest, and give us time to raise the rest of the money. I have no doubt that the whales will do that. And if they can't, then I can sell my house and we can do it. But it's going to be done. And this will be part of a celebration of the return of the salmon to this Elwha system. And just out front in the Strait of Juan de Fuca, we're going to celebrate the return of the orca. So that's where we're at. I just got tired of beating my head against the establishment and said, well, let's play by their rules. We'll just buy it. So that's what I have here. Thank you. And we can return to the screen there, and I'll be open for any questions. We may have a few. Let me know.
Yes, thank you so much, Ken. We do have some good questions in the Q&A. The first question here is from Dave. Hi, Ken. Why is the drop in numbers so much higher for the L pod while JK has stayed basically steady?
Let me go to stop share and look at my screen here. Why is it so? Yeah, LPOD, they never were the primary residents. Even in the early years of the study, they were not here as frequently as the JPOD. So they were foraging more in the strait and out on the coast. And at first, it looked like they could be, there were far more of them than there were of our J's and K's. So we had hoped that they would be the recovery population. But I think they're suffering from the food shortage more. I mean, it's sort of like the different populations have kind of turf. I don't know what their rules are, but J owns the inside waters, K is the middle, and L is the coastal. And in times of plenty, they're all invited in and they can all have a great potlatch. But the L population, when you don't have very many fish around here, they don't have the dibs. They can't, for whatever social reason, turf reason, whatever, they're just not as present, and therefore they don't get the food.
Yes, thank you. This next one is from Jody, and it's about the recent discovery of the toxicity of the tire dust and having an implication for the salmon. Is this influencing public policy to mitigate tire dust?
I hope so, but you know, the legislative process, the legislators themselves, you know, they study what's given to them by their agencies, and they come up with regulations that usually are recommended by their agencies. And I don't know who's going to be in charge of tire dust, and that is, you know, obviously all pollution is going to be a factor in the recovery of wildlife in Puget Sound. So a handle has to be obtained on that, but it's basically a runoff issue that, you know, the streets are all draining into, you know, typically the water always drains into Puget Sound, no matter from where. And if you can run it through the green zones, if you can somehow remove the toxins or the drugs, I mean, all the whales are getting the same drug dose that your toilets get. And that gets whatever goes through the people, you know. Anyway, all of that has to be controlled, but that isn't as urgent as I see in taking good luck stories that we have right now. Like you don't have that tire runoff in the Elwha. I just want to celebrate what works. What works, and okay, let's get as many working things going as we can on all these systems, because they're going to need that 5 million fish in the ecosystem, not just what the Elwha produces.
Thank you. The next one, do you need any volunteers to do any native planting or et cetera?
Well, we're not going to really modify anything on the ranch. We're just going to monitor. And this spring, we'll develop some sort of plan to have participation in what we're doing, even if it's just observation and monitoring. You know, and fortunately, at the edge of the property, we have a stream gauge that'll tell us the flow. I'm going down there and taking pictures all the time right now because I don't at present have sedimentation measurement devices, but we propose that we'll do that. We're going to look at gravel size. We're going to look at all kinds of things. You know, what is correlated with recovery in a positive way.
And this next one from Samuel, I'm just going to summarize it. What are your thoughts on the culling of pinnipeds to affect the salmon populations?
Well, my thoughts on it are is that we've got a natural predator, the transient big killer whale, that is doing a great job, and really it hasn't been added into the calculations on how many, you know, they got to eat a seal a day. And you can look at our transient observations around here. They're doing real well. So they're removing a lot of the pinnipeds. Now, what they can't remove is the pinnipeds that are at the bottom of the dam on the Columbia River. You know, they don't go upriver that far to get them. They can get them out in the ocean, but when you have an aggregation of sea lions at the base of the dam, maybe your only option is to cull them. I don't think that that's going to be a big management success, and it's certainly going to be unpopular. And I don't know, it just strikes me that every time humans meddle in stuff, we mess it up. So why not let the natural system recover it?
Got it. Okay, so this next one's from Paul. And Paul, I apologize if I'm not summarizing this well for you, but it's about the salmon. Are your thoughts that there were already salmon making it up past the Elwha and then removing the dam allowed that population to grow? Or is it more that salmon were trying new rivers from different systems?
There were not salmon above the dams. They couldn't get there. They beat their heads against the concrete at the bottom. But there was about 4 miles of river there that they could spawn in. So there was a residual small population of Chinook. I mean, I'm focusing on Chinook, and they were there. And when the dam was removed, they went past it. And they're recovering in the system now. And I'm looking forward to seeing that recovery to the 30,000 level.
Thank you. And so Rebecca asks, and you already started to answer this question, but do you have plans for the buildings on the ranch? Will they potentially become educational facilities, open for visitation?
Good question. We will welcome some sort of visitation. But really the attraction is the river. You know, fortunately we have the old Highway 101 on our property, and where the bridge used to cross back in 1910. And it's very scenic and very beautiful. And unfortunately the post office isn't there anymore, but maybe we'll put up a little replica thing to just have a handout and information. What we want to do is just celebrate the recovery. The structures themselves, I mean, you got a house, you got a barn, you got a workshop and an arena, and they all keep the rain off, and we're just keeping equipment and boats and stuff in it right now.
Got it. The next question, why are the northern resident killer whales doing better than the southern resident?
Because all the fish that come out the Strait of Juan de Fuca or leave the hatcheries in Puget Sound, Georgia Strait, turn right and go north. And they grow up in that area where we looked at that pattern of Chinook from this area. That's where they go. And that's, so they got, if there is a first dib situation that somehow all the resident fish eating populations decided upon in ages past, the northerns have first dibs. It's just the ones that get past them that get to these whales, and the only way to make it work better is to have more fish.
Thank you. So Carol's asking, what do we do to keep the U.S. Navy from using sonar in the Salish Sea since the FEIS?
I think we've done all we can do. I think they know that it's going to be a big public outroar every time. You know, I mean, this hydrophone systems are here now. We can hear them if they're in here. The question of what about the Northwest training complex on the Olympic Peninsula coast? That's a whole nother question, because that's where a lot of these little fish grow up. That's where a lot of the explosive devices are being tested, trained. It's where the sonar is operating. But fortunately, it's more three-dimensional. I mean, there's a lot of whoever's trying to escape from it, unless they're in the lethal kill zone of a device, can probably have lots of room to escape. But in Puget Sound, there is no escape. You know, like we were hearing J-Pod, we were hearing the sonar when it was off of Discovery Island, and J-Pod was just absolutely freaking out in front of the house here, 12 miles away. They can't get away. And they tried. It just wasn't possible.
Yeah. So Lucy asks, do you think Chinook can actually return to historic population numbers?
Oh, I don't think system-wide they will. You know, one of the things that is really troubling is it seems as though our bureaucrats are fixed on hatcheries or human raising of salmon to bypass a lot of the mortality of you know, from egg to fry to smolt. And that is leading to the, well, we see it's not a success. It doesn't work. We're having a smaller proportion of smolt to adult ratio every time we throw out more baby fish. They're just not making it.
Thank you. So Jody's asking, do you have field science surveys of your stretch of the river through WWU?
I want to find out everything that's been published on that section and who's involved. I mean, we're not trying to come in and crowd in on stuff. What we want to do is just use private domain laws to protect it. So it's not going to be subject to development. You know, it's just not going to happen there. We can ensure that.
Right. And we have a lot of these questions, so I'm just going to summarize them with people are activated after your talk. They want to know what the biggest priority you think is for salmon recovery, especially in this next year, legislatively.
Well, I see the biggest bang for the buck in this area is somehow we got to get the Fraser and its ecosystems up there going again on the Canadian side. And on our side, we definitely have to get the bureaucrats and politicians going in the direction of removing the Snake River dams now. I mean, it's basically, that was just a bludgeoning that we went through over trying to get that done 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just got to be done. And it's stupid. It's absolutely stupid to retain them. You're killing fish and using taxpayer dollars to do it, and ratepayer dollars.
And I have a question here. Are there any future plans for the hatcheries when the salmon runs gain abundance?
Sorry, you asked again. I was trying to.
Yeah, no problem. Christine asks, is there any future plan for the hatcheries when the salmon runs gain abundance?
Well, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife is invested in hatcheries, and they see that as the solution to more fish. But those fish are for harvest. They're not for whales. They're basically, that's the political pressure for them to keep going, and they're using the whales as an excuse to up the quotas that they're releasing if they can. But it's, that's an ever dwindling situation. It isn't going to work forever. We're certainly not going to get involved in the hatchery scheme as it exists. One of the thoughts that Jim Youngren told me about, he's the fellow that has the hatchery at Glenwood Springs on Orcas, was that Long Live the King some years ago enhanced a steelhead population on the Hood Canal by harvesting the eggs from naturally spawned nests. There are only a few of them, raising them in hatchery to avoid all that mortality that was in the egg to smolt stage, and then releasing them as they smoltified in the same area where the nests were. And they recovered the populations of steelhead in that river. If it's needed, that sort of thing could be a function of the WDFW hatchery on the Elwha. Maybe harvest some of the nests and raise the fish and see if, and return them to the same area and see if you get a better recovery. If you're just spinning your wheels, then don't bother spending the money. But that's the only role I see for hatcheries in the future is.
Got it. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to all of these questions. So if you don't have your question asked, leave it up in the Q&A, and hopefully Ken can get to those after this is over, or we'll figure out how to get you some answers. I wanted to ask this one from Jeannie. This may sound naive, but why aren't commercial and sport fishing limits reduced in order to help increase Chinook numbers?
Well, sport fishing, buying the license supports WDFW, and I think they're looking at the economic sides of things pretty carefully. They can't just close fisheries and now nobody buys a license, and they lose all that income. And the same thing happens on the commercial side, that there's big lobbies in every resource. There's the tragedy of the commons. Who owns the fish? Are they just out there for anybody to catch? Or are they there for nobody to catch? If you can make money on it, why can't you catch them? There are plenty of economic arguments to try and lobby for keeping the season open, keeping the quotas as high. That's why I put up the slide of the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. And you do see that it's heavily weighted toward the harvest side, with one conservationist on the panel. Yeah, check into that one. I'm going to check into it.
So this question from Kathy is, do the SRKW miss salmon numbers that are coming from Alaska due to the northern resident population feeding on them?
I do believe so. Yes.
I'm going to circle back up to Heather's question because we have at least a minute here. Do you feel the rights of nature movement can be a strong partner in working for SRKW and salmon, because they focus on legal rights for nature?
Would certainly like to talk to him about it. I'm not familiar with, basically laws are part of what we're trying to influence here. We're using property laws as we're going to ensure this recovery, or at least celebration of recovery. But yeah, there are a lot of laws that need working on.
And one more here from Michelle. Are you encouraged by the orca births this year?
It's encouraging, but the net result's going to be 10 to 15 years from now. And, you know, the two births that we have in J-Pod, we don't know the sex of J58, but J57 is a little male. And I don't want to be sexist about it, but he's not going to have a baby. He's not going to carry its own, he's not going to get pregnant. Pretty much guarantee that. And so he's basically useless in terms of future population, except as a daddy. And we know that we don't need as many daddies as, for some reason or other, this species has a rather unique mating structure here where just a few of the males are fathering almost all the babies. What the others do all the time, I don't know, but they're not fathering babies.
Right, and there are a couple questions here, so I just wanted to put this out there. People are wondering if there's going to be a place to see more information about the Elwha Ranch specifically online.
Yeah, the sale occurred October 20th. You know, we've been in this pandemic thing. We just wanted to get something online on our website right now about it. I don't know whether we'll have a separate website that'll be focused primarily on what's going on in terms of either public participation or support of what we're doing, or whether it'll be on our regular site. It's work in progress. We've only been at it a couple months, and this spring we hope to develop the plan.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ken. And like I said, if there are questions that we didn't have time to get to, you can leave them up in the Q&A. And if Ken has time, he can get to those and get you a written answer.
Right.
And I'm going to pass this along to, I think we're going to introduce the dam panel next.